Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our exploration of standardized testing. We have a master teacher of the GMAT and the GRE. I'm just going to tell you that when she took the GMAT, she scored a 780. I'm sure it's a lot more than our other guest who got into Darden with a sub 700 score. Isn't that right? We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Okay.
It was a sub 500, but I was such a good writer that I could.
So we're going to talk about the state of the market in GMATs and GREs, and actually a really cool part, the part that I would probably tune out on because I'm a poet and not a quant, is the second half of our program when Stacey's going to do a seminar on fast math, which it just scares me right there. Okay.
It could be useful. You never know. It could be useful. You don't. It's not just
I'm
for the.
Sure it would be, because we're geeks here at Poets and Quants. We do a lot with numbers, and I'm thinking, I could probably get a lot of help from this. So let me introduce our two guests first. First, it's Stacey Koprince. You just heard her name. And as I noted before, she is a master teacher, and she's been teaching GMAT and GRE, I imagine, for more than 18 years now at Manhattan Prep, which really, no matter how you slice it, the gold standard firm in GMAT tutoring and classes is definitely Manhattan Prep. Has been for a long time. It is the gold standard in the business. There are a lot of firms out there, I know, but Manhattan Prep puts really big hurdles up on its teachers, and does an exceptional job and has done a great job with people for many, many years. And then we have Jeremy Scheinwald, someone who I count as a friend, and in some ways a colleague, because we're both entrepreneurs in this business. And Jeremy has built an incredibly successful MBA admissions consulting firm called MBA Mission, which I'm sure all of you have heard of. Jeremy is not only the founder, he's the president, and he is a hard-driving entrepreneur. I can attest to that, which I love about him. He also knows so much about how to get into any elite MBA program, because really that's been his bailiwick for many, many, many years. So welcome, Stacey. Welcome, Jeremy. It's great to see the two of you here.
It's great to be here.
Fantastic. And I just want to talk a little bit about what's happened, because obviously the pandemic has disrupted everything, including testing. Before the pandemic, you could never take one of these tests in your home. The tests have all moved online. And most people, frankly, are taking advantage of that, even when they can go to a test center. And there were some early glitches. Actually, I did some stories on that. Stacey was very helpful. I remember when Stacey took the GMAT online for the very first time, and the GRE for that matter. I interviewed her, and we talked about what it was like. And in the case of the GMAT, they really had a few problems that they needed to iron out. And in fact, they have, which is great for them. Now, the pandemic also caused many schools to offer test waivers, and that's still true to some extent today. Most notably, Michigan Ross, UVA Darden, which is Jeremy's alma mater, Indiana Kelley, all have waivers. And even schools that do not have waivers, I mean, if you have a good excuse, you might be able to get a waiver, to be honest. Last year, the roster of schools granting waivers was incredible. More than 2/3 of the top 100 schools were granting waivers of one kind or another. So that was a big deal. And while in the first year of the pandemic, GMAT scores in terms of class averages pretty much plummeted, they're back up this year and up fairly significantly at many schools. So that's also keep in mind. The other thing that's happened is we've had a significant increase in the number of applications to the best programs. You may have seen, I think it was a little over a week ago, a Wall Street Journal story that said applications declined. No, applications are not declining. Indiana Kelly was up 61% in applications last year. Michigan Ross was up 56%. Yale, Duke, Cornell, MIT, all up 12%. Georgetown, McDonough, and Dartmouth Tuck also up in double digits. There were two schools that were down last year. Kellogg, which had a 54% increase in applications the previous year. And in the year they were down, it was the biggest volume they've had since 2014, accepting, of course, the year earlier results. And the Wall Street Journal made a big deal of that. At Columbia Business School, they're down like 6%. A lot of this has to do with basically deadlines coming back to the way they were, instead of being extended by 1, 2, even 3 months at some schools, to give people a little more time during the heart of the pandemic, when there was no vaccination available, and things are much tougher and much more difficult. So meantime, you know, the whole thing changed because you had a lot of international applicants who were admitted, who had to defer. And a lot of those deferments came back in this fall and entered classes, which meant there were fewer seats at many schools. Harvard Business School, many people know, increased their class size by about 100. In fact, they had about 100 people who deferred that went into the class this fall. So they entered the largest single class in their history, over 1,000 students. We'll see the same thing next year because they have another 100 that deferred, who will be coming back into the pool and take 100 seats off the bat in next year's entering class. But what I want to talk about right now is the current state of the whole test optional test waiver movement that began last year. Stacey and Jeremy, why don't you give us your view of waivers, because there's really a couple of considerations here. One is, if a school waives tests, should you take advantage of it? Number one. Number two, if they waive tests, should you not take advantage of it? And should you just send your results in? Stacey, you have a view on that?
Yeah, well, and there's also a couple of different ways it's playing out at different schools. So you have schools offering waivers to specific students, but not to everybody. You also have schools who are going, okay, it's optional for everybody. It's entirely your choice. You decide if you want to take it or not. And we'll look at it if you want to submit it to us. So there's a little bit of seeing what your schools are doing and sort of reading between the lines in terms of how they're wording it there as well. For schools that are in general still requiring it, but they'll offer waivers for someone who can demonstrate quant background or who has a few extra years of work experience or whatever their particular criteria are, that's easy because the school is telling you, hey, we've looked at the rest of your record. We've decided that you don't need to take the test. And so that's an easy decision. Don't take the test. Just go ahead and apply. It's harder when the school's just saying, hey, it's test optional for everybody. It's up to you. You figure it out. You decide what you want to do. And so then it becomes, okay, well, what are the potential positives out of taking the test versus is it worth my time and money to actually go do it? And there's really two potential positives there for somebody to decide that they would want to go ahead and take a test in that scenario. One is just that it will make you more competitive at a particular school. So it increases your chances of getting into that school. The other one is that it could increase the financial package or offer that you get from a particular school. I had a student of mine this past year who basically ended up with a choice between a school that was a higher ranked school that she might not have gotten into, but she got, you know, the score helped boost it up and she had some other things that helped boost it up. So she got in, and then a lower ranked school, but offering her a full ride. That's a hard choice.
It really is.
But it's a great choice to have. So it can do that for you. Of course, there's no guarantee, right? If you take the time to study that you would get that kind of a score.
I mean, the other aspect of actually studying for the test and taking it is that it's great prep for an MBA program.
I think so. Yeah. I think most people going back into B school have been out of school for a while. So even just setting up that study routine again and getting used to looking at your homework and figuring out what you need to learn and figuring out how to motivate and study is very useful. And some, not all, but some of the things that we do study for these exams are things that you would actually use in B school.
I think one other thing is that I think at this point, just pragmatically speaking, there probably isn't a big enough basket of schools for most applicants to be like, yes, all the schools I'm applying to will grant me a waiver or are, test optional, whatever it is. So just pragmatically speaking, in order to apply to all the schools that you want to apply to at this point, you probably are looking at taking the test. I suppose in certain circumstances, you can say, okay, I'm taking the test so that I can have the breadth of schools that I want to apply to. But I might submit to one and not the other. I might ask for a waiver at one or not the other. So there is sort of that pragmatic aspect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't want to be locked out of the school. Let's say the one or the 2 or 3 schools that have test waivers, you're applying to them. Let's say you just don't get in. Then what happens? If you go to second round, you're going to really have to cram for the exam and probably take it earlier than you're ready for.
Yeah, not a fun circumstance.
One thing that I find interesting, I think there's going to be a tipping point, and we'll see how it goes. And I think Stacey would think about this in terms of the data that behind those who get in, how they perform in school, and how that's shown over time. So I can let you speak to that. But I think it'll be interesting to see how envy plays out in this, because if you look at a school like MIT, which saw its applications just balloon and saw its averages go up because of that selectivity around it, I think, what do you do if you're a school that says, okay, we are test mandatory right now, and our neighbor across the way here is test optional, and they just saw a massive boom, and they're going to their ranking could improve in certain rankings. So I think there's going to be pressure among those schools that are still still have mandatory testing to loosen up over time as this goes on. It's
a little bit of a game of chicken, isn't it? It's a little bit of a game of chicken between the optionals and the mandatories, because it is the case. I know, I have friends who teach in B schools and who they've been concerned about. Okay, well, are these people really ready? Did they, as John said, it can actually help you to get ready for the routine of the craziness of your first term at B school. And so they're seeing that play out right now. And I think we'll see with what happens with this year's class in terms of how ready they are to dive into the classroom, whether that maybe changes some opinions one way or the other. I'm not sure which way, but one way or the other going forward in terms of how these tests should be used.
Now, one question I have for you, Stacey, is, has there been any research regarding the test results of the testing center version versus the online version? In other words, I'm wondering if there's any evidence that people score better on one test over another.
So good question. So I was at a conference or a webinar that GMAC put on a couple months ago, and that was one of the things that we talked about. And for the data that they had through that point, let's see, sorry, a couple months ago, my time sense is all screwed up because of the pandemic. I think it was in Q1 of this year. And at that point, they were not seeing any significant or statistically significant differences in people taking the exam online versus in person. Now, for the data period that was being gathered, for part of that time, the exam wasn't being given in the same way that it's given in the testing center. Now that it's actually entirely the same in the testing center and at home, I would think that there would be even fewer differences. So at this point, it appears to be the case that no, there's no real difference.
Although when the test first went online, there was a lot of speculation. Well, would you do better because you're in your home? It's a little more relaxed. Mm-hmm. You don't have to make the drive or the commute to the testing center, or you could be frazzled when you get through heavy traffic and you have to immediately sit in a room with a whole bunch of other people. And there's a sense of tension or pressure there. And if you were more relaxed and at home and you didn't have to get in your car and make that ride, some people thought, well, you'd be in a better place to actually take it.
And I think some people are, right? I think the point is that for some people at home is better and some people the testing center is better. You actually don't want to be too relaxed. You should have a little bit of like nerves going on here, right? Although you got to let the adrenaline go in a little bit to help keep you focused for the 3 hours that you're sitting there taking the test. So there's a fine line between like enough nerves or adrenaline to kick up your performance a notch and so much that it's actually hurting your performance. So whether that's at home or in the testing center for you is it's different for different people.
I've got just enough nerves right now that I think it's making my performance in this webinar just like right at the right amount.
Just perfect. Yeah, you're peaking right now.
Exactly.
Jeremy, what do you advise people? Do you, if in fact they're applying to test optional schools? Okay, so let's say I'm applying to Michigan Ross and Cornell and UVA Darden. And those are the three schools I really want to go to. And I'm not going to apply to Harvard and Stanford and Wharton or Columbia or NYU Stern. Should I really take a test?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I hate to bust out a cliche here, but there are no two snowflakes that are alike, right? So, everyone has their own, their own idiosyncrasies as an applicant. So, does the applicant have a 3.9 in engineering from University of Illinois, or do they have a 3.7 in art history from the University of Saskatchewan? Little Canadian reference there for Stacey, who's in Canada, and I'm Canadian originally as well. So I think you have to kind of look at what you in some way you have to prove your competency. So, the business school will not accept you if you can't say, hey, I am, fundamentally competent analytically and quantitatively. So, if you have that foundation in your profile, it becomes a different story. Now, at a school like Darden, where there's so many different variations on this theme. At a school like Darden, Donna Clark has really led the way in trying to democratize the situation for people. She's a big fan of HBS Online. So for someone who is applying to Darden, HBS Online, they take a course instead of taking the GMAT, and that might prove their competency. For others, you might. So I guess there's, again, it's very specific to the individual, but like if you can prove your competency, the need to take a test declines, then I would revert back to what Stacey said before, which is, have you historically performed well on standardized tests? Do you believe that you can do better than the average? Then it'll help you, and then it might help you with scholarships. In an interesting wrinkle, I personally would say there's a very strong argument for people figuring this out way earlier in the process, because it gives them a lot more flexibility and optionality in making these choices. It's like, okay, I beat my head against the wall for 3 months. It's March. Okay, it's not going to happen for me. I'll take the test optional route. Okay, I'm at 710. Maybe I'll give it an extra shot for a month and I'll get it up to 730 or 740. So I know it's not a precise answer, but this is why we're always happy to chat with applicants for free in a free consultation, because these are the types of questions that people ask, and you can usually quickly size someone up and size up their needs.
And then, of course, regardless of what's required or not, is the whole question of should it be required? If you have an engineering degree, undergrad from an IIT, an MIT, a Cal Poly, a Georgia Tech, I mean, really, is there any question that you can handle the fairly rudimentary quant in an MBA program? And why should you have to sit and take a test for that? That's the argument that Scott Beardsley, the dean of UVA Darden, makes. And I think it's a damn good argument, frankly.
I think he's right. Yeah. There should be multiple ways to demonstrate competence. The test is one of them, but it shouldn't be the only way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Stacey and I were kind of chatting about this earlier, but it sort of is anathema to what admissions officers say, but it could easily be understood, which is that, because admissions officers always say there's no like cutoff. But there is a world in which there could just be a simple pass-fail cutoff for this that says you're competent or you're not, according to analytical data that's come out in the past.
That's really how standardized tests should be used. They should be used as threshold indicators where, if you get above X, it's good enough, and we can forget about the test. And now we're just going to look at the rest of your application. It's how they should be used. The B school rankings juggernaut has changed things, has turned it into an arms race. Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, because this is a question I'm always asking and have asked for more than a decade. What is the threshold? If you have a 650 or a 600, is that sufficient enough to give assurance to an admissions official that you can do the math in an MBA program? What's the number?
Yeah, so it's not a 3-digit number because you'd have to look at the quant score alone. Since
Okay.
the total score is a combination of your quant and verbal skills, somebody could max out verbal and be really low on quant and still have a 600, right?
Good.
So
Good point.
you'd have to look at the individual scores.
Good point.
On the quant side, so here's another thing that a lot of people don't know. So a lot of people have seen over the last 10 or 15 years as the GMAT, for example, has become much more of an international exam, and you have many people around the world taking it. You saw this thing with the percentiles going crazy, where it's now the case that, you know, a 50 is the like 90. You have to score in the 90th percentile. You have to get a 50 or out of 51 on the exam. And so everything's crazy with the percentiles. This percentiles change because the pool of people taking the exam changed, but the exam itself didn't change. So the math skills that it takes to score a 40 versus a 45 versus a 50 on the GMAT, those math skills are the exact same math skills that you needed to get those scores 20 years ago. That has not changed. So the school, like basically we should all just ignore the percentiles. They don't mean anything. You should be looking at for your program, and there are different programs that want different levels of competence, right? So for your program, what is that threshold number? For a top 10 school, or the kind of school that's looking for the elusive 7xx score, I would argue that probably about a 44, 45 on quant should be good enough for anybody. From there, you've demonstrated enough competence that, you know, okay, let's toss you into the program.
But because of rankings, as you pointed out before, instead of looking for 44, 45, what are they looking for?
So a lot of schools will look at that as sort of like a minimum on the quant. Sorry, and this is, again, we're talking top schools, so top tier, top 10 schools. They are looking for people to score about a minimum of a 44, 45. On the verbal side, they generally consider, again, for those top schools, like 35, 36 is the minimum for verbal. The scoring skills aren't the same. The problem is with those two scores together, if you got a 45 on quant and you got a 36 on verbal, your total score will only be about a 650. So the total score wouldn't be enough. So you have to ratchet it up somewhere to get that total score to be above the 700. And
Right.
so this is where the craziness comes in, and we've seen the average scores go up over the years, because it really then becomes the rankings game, where a school's looking at two people who would both succeed in the program. They both got great things, and you know, this person has 40 more points on the GMAT than that person, and we know that goes into our average, and we know the average goes into our rankings, and it's an insidious cycle.
Yeah, unfortunately. I wish US News would just abandon it.
Yeah.
The truth is, if more schools grant waivers, it's going to be more problematic to weight GMATs and GRE scores as heavily as US News does. It's just,
it doesn't work.
Sense. It doesn't work. Exactly right. Do you think the genie could be put back in the bottle? Did things go back to the way they were before the pandemic, or will schools continue to accept other tests and grant waivers? Jeremy, what do you think?
I think the genie cannot be put back in the bottle, or at least at certain schools they can't. I mean, it seems like, you know, Darden is very, very committed to this, you know, to
they really are.
Yeah, like, and not even from like the insanity of the test regime itself, but the just equity and you know, the ability, the fact that it's really, at some point, sometimes it just comes down to the ability of an individual to pay an excellent tutor and get an advantage. So there are schools like that. I mean, what's the incentive for MIT Sloan, who's enjoying, you know, 2,500 more applicants, unless they just feel so overwhelmed and overworked that they want to put a rate limiter on it. But I mean, they what's the incentive for them to turn back? So
Sure.
I think, you know, admissions officers are governed by self-interest, as they should be. You know, they want to put together the best classes possible, and you know, I think those who are doing this are seeing the benefits of it, and that's really why, like I said before, I think it could tip the other way. Like if it's just going to take one of Harvard or Stanford to do it, and then the whole thing is over, and it might be over like beyond the business school world if that happens. Like I think it would be such a you know, stake in the ground. I would almost challenge them. I don't think they're listening, but I would almost challenge them to do it, and show the courage and the leadership that they teach in their programs. And
I think we're seeing it already on undergrad, right? UC has made the announcement, the UC schools.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
So-
basically the entire Ivy League is test optional.
Yeah.
And you know, look, I'm having lunch with Kirsten Moss over at Stanford on Friday. I'll ask her this question directly.
Yeah, please do let us know.
Frame it as a leadership challenge. Frame it. See what she says. You frame it as a leadership challenge. And I should say that I you know, as much as I'm saying I think it should be gone, I
see the value in it too. You know, I mean, I really do. Yeah. No, but again, it doesn't have to be completely gone. It can be optional. And
well, and also like, let's, you know, I love these tests because I'm a nerd and I like taking these tests, but they can serve a purpose. They serve to, they have too much emphasis placed on them right now. They're too much a part of the process right now. They can serve a purpose. There are other valid ways, as John said earlier, to demonstrate the kinds of skills that these tests also show. Give people the choice if you want to show it via avenue A or B or C, and one of the avenues can be the test for people who prefer that. That's fine. But you know, use these in the way that they should be used, not what it is now.
I should say one thing in defense of the schools, because and anyone listening who's feeling like they got vertigo because we're talking about all these high scores, but you know, you know, over the years we have helped many people. You know, I mean, you know, in aggregate, who've been in the, you know, the nature of an average is such that you can be above the average or below the average, and I take a lot of pride in a couple of applicants that I've helped that have when they've released the class profile have been at the very bottom nick of the class profile. So you know, they are still letting in some people who do not have 730s, but you have to be, you know, to be truly exceptional and almost be saying, you know, to the school, everything about me is so compelling that you must set this aside because you are going to miss out. And I know an individual who's at Stanford right now like that, who was truly that. And I remember saying that to her, that they could look at you and say, this is, you know, this is a score we have to set aside. And she got in, and I was like, I am actually proud of them for making the right choice and having the courage to, you know, accept a small, you know, like if Stanford's still going to be Stanford if their GMAT average falls by 0.01 because they accepted someone amazing.
In fact, they were worried that it's too high and discouraging too many applicants.
Stanford's is too high. It's gotten really crazy. Yeah, you know,
but let's look at Wharton. Okay, Wharton had a record median that's now 10 points above Harvard at 740 in this latest
that's insane. That's insane. And
it just doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make any sense anymore. Like I said, there's a place within the system, within the application process for this, but it's the rankings have taken over, and that needs to be fixed somehow. You know, but the system is what it is right now. And so the question is, do you do it right now? Do you go and if you're applying right now this fall, do you go ahead and take the exam? Jeremy, I like what you said earlier around, you know, try it and see, and you don't have to submit the scores if you don't end up liking them. You know, give yourself that shot. There are free resources out there to get started. I would really just go get your hands on all the free resources out there that you can from every single company, and take that as far as you can. So you're just investing your time. See where that takes you. Go take a practice test and see where that takes you, and you'll be in a better position to decide, okay, do I want to invest another couple of months and make this happen, or does it look like, no, maybe this isn't the path for me?
Right. And in support of Jeremy's "the genie is out of the bottle" theory, I'm just going to add that this issue is becoming more intertwined with the issue of diversity, because clearly people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds score significantly lower on these standardized tests. It's because their parents might not have been highly educated. Their parents might not be white-collar professionals. They're not sitting around at the dining table every night with two parents talking about what they did at work. And to the extent that it disadvantages and plays against a very high priority now at all the business schools to be truly diverse. And this is going to be scrutinized really heavily now. I mean, you know, for the first time ever, Bloomberg Business Week inserted a diversity index in its ranking. They did a horrible job of figuring it out in terms of how it would be weighted, but nonetheless, they took a shot at it. I think we're going to see more of that. And I think this issue of standardized tests is going to be very much an issue about diversity, and whether you close the door on more people or open the door. And as we know, one of the major reasons why the GRE has gained market share over the GMAT in the last 10, 15 years is because the people at ETS who administer the test went to the business schools and said, hey, you want a more diverse group of people? You want more women? You want more people who might go to public policy or other schools for a graduate degree, then you better take the GRE. And sure enough, this latest class at Harvard, a record number of people were admitted on the GRE. Same at Berkeley, a new record there for GRE test takers. So then the question is for Stacey, which test do you take? For years, people said, oh, you got to take the GMAT because schools won't count the GRE as much as they would the GMAT.
Right, which is not an issue anymore.
Yeah, which is not. And D. Leopold, managing director for many years at Harvard, could scream, this was not true for years and years and years. And even now, Chad Losey, the managing director, with this record number of GRE test takers in this class, says, I hope this lays to rest any question of whether or not we think one test is better than another.
Yeah, I think the schools at this point, there might have been some hesitancy in the first year or two while people were getting used to the exam. They'd worked with the GMAT forever and the GRE was new to them. But I don't think that's an issue anymore. So first of all, there are actually 3 exams. To make it even more complicated now, you've got the GMAT, the GRE, and the EA, which not as many schools accept at this point, but it's growing.
Except in NYU Stern and Columbia, though, and those are 2 really big schools.
Exactly. And because they're geographically close, you have a lot of people who are just applying to those 2 schools. And so that's a valid path potentially to just go ahead and take that exam. So the short answer for if you're going to take an exam, the short answer for which exam you take is really just which exam itself is best for you based on your strengths and weaknesses. That's a different answer for different people. In the EA, for people who don't know, it's short for executive assessment. It's an exam made by the same people who make the GMAT. It's got the same questions and content that you see on the GMAT, but it's a shorter exam. It was designed for executive MBA programs, but now a number of specialized masters and regular MBA programs are picking it up.
In fact, it's only half as long, right?
It's half as long. It's an hour and a half long. Yeah. And the really interesting thing about the EA, so my personal bias is actually towards that exam. I think of the 3, if you have the option to take the EA is the one that you take. It sort of marries the best of both worlds between the GMAT and the GRE. It has the cachet, first of all, of the GMAT, and it has things like the integrated reasoning section, which is sort of almost like case studies in standardized test form that the business schools asked to be developed like 5 or 6 years ago. So you've got that piece of it, but the way that not to geek out too much, but the way that the algorithm is built or the way that the test functions, instead of as on the GMAT having to answer a question that's in front of you, and then once you answer it, you can't go back to it, which is very stressful for a lot of people. The EA functions more like the GRE, where you get small panels of questions, and within a panel, you can move around among the questions however you want. So you get, sort of, like I said, the best of both worlds of the sort of the rigor and the stamp of the content and the question types that you see on the GMAT, but in a form that is less stressful for the test taker, which is more like the GRE. Sorry,
I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
So I would just add that I think the same deal with the EA as there is sort of with the with test optional. Like I think as more schools accept the EA, more schools will have to accept the EA. And now there are 4. I'm pretty sure the other 2 are Duke and Darden in sort of the top bucket that accept the EA. And the GRE for a long time was, and this is why I think the EA is actually going to spread quickly. The GRE for a long time was sort of the back door when it wasn't that important, when people weren't measuring it. There was actually a bit of a gulf between sort of if you understood a GRE score in GMAT terms, the way the ETS has their like score comparator that I know that some admissions officers used, they didn't really line up well. If you looked at their average GMAT score and their average GRE, it was easier to get in with the GRE. That didn't mean that they weren't taking the GRE seriously. That was sort of part of the mistake. But now that the GRE, they still wanted to see that quantitative aptitude. So they needed to see it somewhere, even when the GRE was lower. So as the GRE scores are rising now and are basically equivalent to the GMAT scores at certain schools, these admissions officers are going to start looking for that back door where they can say to someone, hey, you're an amazing applicant. You have that 3.7 in electrical engineering or whatever it is, you're at the top of an IIT, whatever it is, please just quietly go and take the EA, do well on it, and we can, do
well enough, basically,
well
right?
enough.
Well enough.
Yes, well enough. Yeah, and we can kind of, slip you in the back door. And I think that's gonna spread. Like, we
Well,
have
and the
4
EA
major.
too, at this
Let's
point,
see next year.
the schools are using it in the way that standardized tests really should be used. If you go and you talk to the schools,
Right.
almost all of them, there's a different scoring threshold for MBA programs versus regular MBA programs, but they're all pretty much saying the same score is just like, oh, score this or higher. That's it.
Right.
And so this is how standardized tests should be used. There's some kind of a threshold for a particular program. And if you can meet that threshold, great. We know you can handle the work, and now we're going to go assess the rest of your application.
So here's a question, Stacey. Admissions officers will always tell you, the applicant, to take the test that you think you can do best at. But that means that you actually have to take these tests. Isn't there an easier way to figure out if the GMAT, if you're better suited for the GMAT, the GRE, or the EA? Isn't there an easy way?
So all of them actually test pretty much almost entirely the same underlying material. Certainly on the quant side, the underlying material is the same. There's some different question types, but they're very similar. You can literally go invest 1 week studying for the GMAT and EA combined, the question types and stuff that show up on there, a week for GMAT, ditto. Go take a practice test of each one and see what your starting point is, and just see which test felt better to you.
Is that what you generally recommend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just go try it. A little bit, a couple weeks of your time. You're going to B school. This is going to be years of your life. You can invest a couple of weeks to see what's going on. And the content that you're learning, like the underlying content, the formula for the area of a circle and whatever, is the same on both tests. So you're not losing anything in terms of that time investment.
Okay, we all know that Jeremy is one of the star alums of Darden. My question to Jeremy is, if you were applying today, would you seek a waiver? Would you take the GMAT, the GRE, or the EA, and why?
Okay, the answer is none of the above. I had a very, very high GPA, but I had no quant subjects at all. Okay, so I had no ability to prove my quantitative aptitude. I did not have a ton of confidence in my abilities, although I did reach the average for the year that I ultimately did reach the average for the year that I think it was 10 points under the average for the year I applied, but I was close enough. But I think I would have avoided all the stress, and I would have taken HBS online, because I would have known that I could control the environment, and I could prove myself, and like I could learn the material, and I could pass the test. And so for that particular school, that's what I would have done. Now, as an applicant, I probably would have applied to a breadth of schools and couldn't have just left it there. So if you expand the range of options, I probably still would have been stuck thinking about the scores I applied to, the schools I applied to. I probably would have had to take the GMAT.
And this is a perfect segue for Stacey's fast math seminar, because Jeremy, you're going to benefit from this seminar, so that when you do take whatever test you're going to take, you're going to kill it on the quant.
I'm looking forward to that. I always learn from Stacey. Stacey and I are good partners in quant crime. We do webinars together. We have good online chemistry.
Keep trying to teach him math. I'm not sure how much it sticks.
Okay, well, we're going to try it right now. So go for it, Stacey.
All right. So I got to explain fast math, because fast math is basically, it's this idea of quick and dirty is good enough in most scenarios. And that's true on these exams. And it's true when you're at work and you're sitting in a meeting with people that you're talking to. And it's true of a lot of times for these classes that you're taking in school. And so, as with so much else in life, the theme is basically do what you need to do, but don't do that much more to like basically get it done and then move on to your next task. So that's the topic or the theme of what we're going to talk about with this fast math presentation. Now, the title you're going to see is focused on GMAT, because that score that's sitting there, the key to 700, is a GMAT score. But the concepts that we're going to talk about are applicable to any of the 3 exams, to GRE, GMAT, and EA. All of this stuff is taught on all of the exams, and the structure of what we're going to talk about is for all of these exams. We're going to talk about 2 big concepts. We're going to talk about estimation, which everybody does every day. You do this all the time. And we're going to talk about benchmarking, which is something mathy related. I'll talk about it when we get there. How to estimate, when to estimate. So basically, how do you do it, and how do you know when to do it? And when you do have to get a bit more precise than estimation, what can you do? And that's this benchmarking thing, where we're going to get a little bit more precise than just estimation. Okay, so read this. You have about 15 seconds left before your meeting now. You go into your meeting, or are you going to talk to me?
I'm going to talk to you.
What, like, I don't have a, you know, I don't have my
late
calculator.
for every meeting, so they expect me to be late.
So, basically, like, how do I quickly in my head, I don't have my calculator on my laptop sitting in front of me. Like, what am I like? Is this good enough that I actually want to talk to this person? I'm not going to sit here and be like, let's see, 5% of 10,000 every month for 2 years. That's 24 months. Let me start calculating. Like, I'm not going to sit here and do that, right? It's way too complicated. So I'm going to make it easier. I'm not going to multiply by 24, but I could do 10 months. If I'm going to get 5% back a month for 10 months, that's just 5 times 10, that's just 50%. Oh, so I can get 50% back in 10 months, double that for my 100%. Okay, that's 20 months, and that's less than the 24 months of the 2 years. All right, let's talk. I'm going to be late to my next meeting. Then I got to see whether I think you're legit or whether you're trying to scam me. That's a different question. So it's just this idea of doing some back of the envelope, just figure out roughly ballpark what we're talking about so that you can see the direction that you want to go with the conversation. And this is something that's going to be crucial on the GMAT or EA or GRE, but it's also just crucial when you, like I said, when you're sitting in a meeting, when you're negotiating something, when you're looking at the numbers from last month versus this month on sales, whatever it is, just to make sure that you get a sense of like, okay, what did we do? Where did this go? Did it actually get better or did it get worse? What's going on here? You can use this all the time. Look at these 5 answer choices. These 5, it's pretty obvious that there's a big clump here in terms of the answer choices. We've got a couple around 1,000, a couple around 65, and this one that's way up there at 4 million. So there's some obvious places in here in a problem associated with these kinds of answer choices to estimate. These ones are a little closer together, relatively speaking. We've got a 10% versus 20% split, and maybe we can also say, oh, 1/4 versus a fifth. Okay. What about these? And I'm not looking for just Jeremy and John to answer, by the way. All of you listening to us, tell me in the chat. What's going on with these answer choices? How could you estimate?
Is the idea to pick the middle of the road?
So we're not answering the question, but just like, what's the
framework thinking behind it?
Yeah. How would you think about the problem knowing that these are the answer choices?
I mean, you have 1 pluses and you have, you sort of have like a 1 plus close to 1 and way under 1.
Yeah. Okay. So just start. So the first basic split is less than 1 versus more than 1, right? If I can estimate that far in the problem, oh, it's more than 1, I'm down to 2 answer choices right there. And then check it out. This answer choice is less than 50% or less than half, but these 2 are more. And this one's like 70%, 0.7, right? And this one's almost 1, but just a little bit less. So there's another split that I could do in terms of estimating. And then even these 2, this one's a little bit over 1. This is well over 1. This is like 3 point something. So I may actually be able to get all the way to the correct answer, not having to calculate the exact number.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to notice that before I even start working on the problem. So one of the things you're doing when you're doing a multiple choice problem like this is you're actually glancing at, you read the problem up here, sure, but you actually glance at the answer choices before you do anything, because the answers are part of the problem. All the data that's in front of you, including the answer choices, is part of how you're going to decide what you're going to do when you approach this. Okay, here's another set. So this one, I won't make you negative and positive is the obvious split here between the first 2 and the second 2. And then we've got a split between less than 1 and more than 1 on this one. So even if the problem doesn't tell you, hey, estimate this, or, approximately blah, 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 glance at the answer choices. That might right there tell you. And sometimes it'll be really obvious that you can estimate, but sometimes it'll be things like this where you have to study enough to learn how to read that, to learn how to look for those kinds of things and be like, oh no, this is an estimation opportunity too. And also look for language like this. If they're asking me for what's closest to some answer choice, that's a definite estimation opportunity, because literally they're telling me we don't expect you to calculate it exactly. So you're looking for the language in the problem as well to help you tell. And if you're sitting in a conference room at work, or nobody's in a conference room, if you're sitting in a Zoom meeting at work, this is how you're thinking all the time. It's always just, let's estimate it a little bit more. Is it a little bit less? Were we positive or were we negative? I don't know, that kind of stuff. Okay. Try this problem. Okay, I'm going to stop you right now. Normally on the GMAT, you get like 2 minutes to do a problem, right? This one's a modified. I've only given you 3 answer choices, not 5, whatever. This is from our Foundations of Math materials. What are you looking for? What did I ask you to find? Nobody in the chat wants to talk to me. Talk to me in the chat.
Hey, it's 3-2, we know.
All right.
But the tricky part of this is the reversing the
reversal
ratio question.
So first of all, they reverse. I asked you for blue to white, but I gave you white to blue. So watch out for that. They will definitely do that. But then from there, okay, I can write down 36 to 24, and then I got to know what I'm supposed to do to reduce this. Do I really need to know how to reduce this? Look at the answer choices.
Right.
Why does it have to be C?
Because there's only one that has the greater amount on the left side.
Bigger, smaller, done.
Yeah.
Literally done.
Yeah.
I don't have to do any math.
Good point.
So there are a bunch.
I felt for the reverse BW though. I was like, it's 2/3, of course. So I got to read more carefully.
Yeah. Also, if you're going to guess, but if you have no idea how to do this and you're going to guess between them, definitely guess B or C, because one of those is a trap and one of those is the correct answer. So the idea basically here is, in general, for these exams and for when you're at work, don't do work you don't have to do. Do a good job with what you need to do, but don't do work you don't have to do. Do what you need to do and move on to your next task. It's exactly the habit that you want to get into for this test. And this is one of the things too that's actually going to help you when you get to business school, building this habit of really looking at something and looking at it globally first. Not just let me write this down and start calculating, but big picture, let me just sit back and go, okay, what's going on here? And what do I really need to do here? That's going to help me to prioritize. It's going to help me to work efficiently. It's going to help me to do what needs to get done, but not to do stuff that's unnecessary. And that's what a good business person's doing every day. And that's what you want to be doing in B school as well. Okay, let's do skipping the solution. Try this. When you have an answer, tell me in the chat, the answer letter. I see a hand raised from Rebecca and Tori. I'm just going to ask you, are people able to chat? Is the chat on for everyone? Just to make sure.
Can Jeremy answer?
Okay. Someone's telling us in the Q&A that they believe the Zoom chat is disabled. So just go ahead and tell me in the Q&A. Submit something through the Q&A.
Yeah.
Tori, if it is possible to enable the Zoom chat, that would be great. All right, and I'm getting some answers in through the Q&A. Jeremy and John, don't look at the Q&A. No cheating.
I already know the answer for good.
All right, what's your answer?
Well, it has to be bigger than 63, obviously. So you immediately eliminate A and B.
Okay, so we're going to start with it's reduced to get to 63. It doesn't matter what's reduced by, it's reduced to get to 63.
Yeah.
So that number has to have been larger to start with.
Right.
So boom, A and B are gone. Okay, great. Then what? How do you decide between C, D, and E?
It can't be 100. It's not, if it's
so at this point, like just try one. These numbers aren't that bad. And in fact, 100 is the easiest number sitting here if you're going to take it down by 30%, right? So just take that. That's 70. Okay, that's not right. So cross off E. Is it pretty close to right, or is it further away from right? It's pretty close. It's supposed to be 63. It's 70. Okay, the answer is D. So again, there's no like, you have to understand what they're talking about. You have to be able to think your way logically through the quant concepts that are sitting in front of you. You don't have to sit there and be doing math on paper. Now, you will have to do some math on paper for these exams. It's not the case that every single question can be done this way, but a number of the questions can either be done fully in the way that I'm demonstrating right now, or they can at least be made much faster and easier, even if there are times when you're doing some real math. And again, that kind of thinking and training yourself to approach this stuff this way is exactly what's going to help you in B school as well. B school is not going to be here, solve this algebraic equation. It's going to be, can you actually just look at the big picture and think your way through logically what's going on? Okay, try another. And as before, when you've got an answer or a good guess, go ahead and stick that in the Q&A. And Jeremy, I'm not going to let you let John do all the work. So this time I'm going to ask you a question. He's like,
I don't know. I've got an analytical mind, even though the poet side of me takes over. I just
you prefer the poet side of you, but the quant is there if you need it. All right.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a good. I like that. I like that. What's going on with Arnaldo? How do we figure this out?
I mean, I just kind of started casting out the highs and lows pretty quickly. So I was like, okay, I mean, if he gets paid $11 for 1,000, that'll be 11,000. It's just way out of the range.
Yeah.
It was like $11 for 50. I didn't bother with the 2. I was like $11, that'd be 550. So that's way out of range. And then I was just like, then I sort of thought to myself, well, 11 times. I sort of looked at the other number. I'm like, I mean, 11 times 2 is, it's sort of like it's the only one that starts with 2. So that's kind of all I really did after that.
So that's 2,200, right? And
Right,
then
but
what's
I
the
didn't have to
other?
do the rest, right?
What's the other
Like,
detail? So
didn't-
$11 for each ticket, and then what?
and then $2 for everyone who sells over 100.
Over 100.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I misunderstood that, I think, actually, but I think it didn't matter.
It didn't matter because the numbers are so far apart.
Right, because I just looked at it, I was like, once I figured out that only one ended in 2, or other one began with 2, I was like, the rest of them are just toast anyway.
Yeah, the numbers are so far apart. So another thing that you can just look for is even if there's a relatively even spread between the numbers, they are just so far apart. There's just a wide range and every number is pretty different than every other number. And so you can estimate pretty heavily. And I know that on a problem like this one, which is I call these both TWs for time waster and WOT for wall of text. Wall of text, I actually look here first. I don't even start reading first. I just look over here first. I'm like, what do I got? Can I estimate? Okay, yeah, it looks like I can estimate. Okay, now let me go read the story and jot some stuff down and just try to understand what's going on in the pieces of the story. But it's looking pretty likely that I can estimate just by glancing at the answer choices without reading anything at all on the problem. And yeah, when you get in there, okay, so for my first 100 tickets, I'm making $11. That's $1,100. Okay, that's not enough. So I have to have sold more than 100 tickets. But I didn't sell that many more because it's only $2,400. It's not going to be 1,000, and even 500 is going to be too high. My base wage that I'm getting is $11 per ticket. That's just a little bit less, and then I've got this little tiny bonus per ticket. Okay, that's going to be it. That's close enough. 500 is too high. And that's enough again to get there, to get to the answer. So this problem is now starting to get more into GMAT format, excuse me. And this would be on the easier side. This is from our Foundations of Math materials, but this is GMAT format at this point, basically. versus some of the earlier ones that were just trying to illustrate this concept that we're getting at. And let's see, someone's telling me, yes, excellent. Anonymous attendee who just gave me a little explanation in the Q&A. You got it, exactly. Exactly. Okay. All right, let's do some more. Oh, and just read this. I've already told you this, but in life in general. Okay, so that's estimation. Let's talk about benchmarking. When we have to get a little bit more precise, we actually do need to do some numbers or at least be more precise with our calculations than what we just did. We're at a restaurant, server brought the bill. Give me an amount. How much is our bill? What do you want it to be?
You love to fine dine. It's
Rebecca gave me $532. We seriously love to fine dine. So $532 is the bill. We are very particular about giving an 18% tip. It can't be 20%, it can't be 15, it's got to be an 18% tip. So we need an 18% tip. Oh, but all of our phones are dead. So we can't just plug it into our phones. What are we going to do? So we're going to use benchmarking, percent benchmarking. And so percent benchmarking basically says use some combination of 50%, 10%, 5%, and 1% to calculate any percentage that you need, just in a much easier way. So if I want to get to 18%, well, 18% is pretty much about 20%, but not quite. It's minus 2%. 20%, well, 10% is 53.2. Okay, well, 20% is double that. Let's see, 53, 106.4. 2%, what's 2%? If 106.4 is 20%, what's 2%?
It's close enough with 10.
Literally just move the decimal one more over.
Oh, how easy.
Right? 20%, 2%, just move. It's like 10% to 1%, just move the decimal over. So 106.4 minus 10.64. And at this point we can decide, like, do we want to get down to pennies in giving the bill? We can, we're pretty close here. Or is this close enough? 106, so that's 96-ish dollars.
So I'm even lazier than you. I was like, I mean, 64 cents. I'm like, I'm not even gonna bother calculating. I'm like, yeah, it's $10. Who cares?
Yeah, whatever, 10 bucks. So, and again, it depends on how close you need to get. The other thing though that I would do is if the answer choices, let's say that they were all in this range of like $95 to $96, and just change, right? Well, then I'd look at, oh, well, if I've got 40 cents minus 64 cents, just how many cents am I going to end up with? There's a decent chance that only one answer choice will have that exact number of cents, and then boom, I'm done. I don't have to do the whole calculation. So there's a ton that you can do here to simplify this, or to get actually pretty darn close to a very specific number by using this benchmarking idea. And so the idea behind all of this, again, is just 50%, 10%, 5%, 1%. So let's play through with that a little bit more. So take a number like 5,860. And if I want to take 50% of that, again, no calculator, trying to do this on paper, that's a little annoying. But go to some number that's an easier number than this one. Like if I had given you 60-60, okay, well, 50% would be 30-30. So if I just take this part right here, if it had been 60, half of that would be 30, but it's 58, so half of it's 29. And then this really is 60, so half of that is actually 30. So, okay, there's my half. And then what about 10%? Well, 10% is just move the decimal place over one, that's 586. And 1% is just move it over another decimal place. So that's 58.6. And so I can get any of these numbers and then use those as building blocks to calculate any percentage that you want me to. Let's say our bill for our dinner was $58.60. And this was not a fancy restaurant, Rebecca, sorry. And so then it's, do I need to be super precise, or can I do what Jeremy did and just get close enough? And so I'm just going to go, well, 10% is just under $6, 20% is a little bit less than $12. So $2 is, again, just in my brain, moving that decimal place over one is 1.2. It's a little bit over $1. So something a little less than $12 minus something a little bit over $1 is like a little bit less than $11. Or if, again, if I really need to, for whatever reason, I can do the exact numbers, find 10%, double it, move the decimal over to get 2%, and do the actual subtraction to get the exact number. So wow your friends and your mother at parties and at restaurants, and use this to calculate exactly 18% of a tip, but you can use this to calculate any percentage that anybody gives you. just using these benchmark percentages. What about, so you're in a store, you see the shirt, it looks awesome, it's 120 bucks. It's on sale. You have $100. Can you buy it? Yes or no? Yeah, we're good there. What if you only have 80 bucks? Can you buy it? I got to think about that one a little bit more. We're getting close. I'm not sure yet. So I got to do some sort of estimation or something here to figure out, do I actually have enough money to buy this shirt? One thing that I can do is just say, well, 35% is about a third. What's a third of 120? Okay, so there's 80. 120 minus 40 is 80. Did I just underestimate or overestimate? I called 35% 1/3. So 1/3 is 33%. I underestimated a little bit by bringing this percentage down a little bit. So this number that I calculated, this 40, it actually should have been a little bit bigger because I underestimated over here. So I'm going to put an up arrow next to my 40. So as I'm estimating, I'm always keeping track by putting little like up and down arrows so that I know which direction my estimation is going. So I brought this down a little bit. So this should actually have been a little bit more than 40 bucks. So when I subtract from my 120, I should actually be a little bit less than 80 bucks. Okay, great. I've got enough money to buy this shirt. We're good. So just be doing that too as you're going of like, you're not just estimating, you're keeping track of your estimation so that you can adjust or see what you need at the end when you're looking at the answer choices or looking at the threshold that you're dealing with. If you needed to get more precise, let's say it wasn't just I have 80 bucks and can I buy it, but it's how much is this thing actually going to cost? I can use that same benchmarking trick that I just showed you. So build it from easier percent. So for example, 65% could be 50 plus 10 plus 5. So 50% of the 120 is 60 bucks. 10%, move the decimal over to get 12. And then 5% is just half of 10%. So divide that by 2, get 6. And so I'm paying 60 plus 12 plus 6 bucks or 78 bucks. But the other thing that I can do, if I don't want to do this percentage, breaking up this percentage thing, is you can also break up the number. So it's 120 bucks. Oh, I forgot to change the question here. It's not the $80. It's just what does it cost? So $120. Well, what if I do $100 and then $10 and $10 and break it up that way? So $100, it's easy for me to do 35% off $100, 65% of that. Okay, 65 bucks. And then for 10 bucks, oh, well, actually $10 is just $100, but less a decimal point. So instead of $65, it's $6.50. But I've got 2 of those $10, so double that to get $13. And there I am at my $78 again to buy my shirt. So there are a bunch of things that you can do here around using easier numbers, whether that's percentage numbers or the actual numbers right here, but just basically looking at anything going, well, that number's annoying. What's a close number that's easier to work with? And let me do the calculation with that instead. And if I need to get more precise, I just am breaking that down into smaller chunks so that I can go and do much easier math to get there without having to whip out my phone or my laptop or whatever to do it.
Wow. There you
Right?
go.
So I told you, use this, you can use this in real life.
I love it.
All right.
Yeah.
And this is like, you're standing in the grocery store and you're like, oh, do I buy this size of, whatever, my Rice Krispies or that size? And like, which one am I going to get more money for? The secret is that they now have it in little fine print on the label right there. So you can just look at it, but you can also in your head just do some little calculations here to figure out like, am I actually getting a deal if I buy the bigger thing? Or are they going to sell it to me for less or what? All right. You ready? 2 minutes. This is a problem from the free practice set. So this one is an actual GMAT problem. It's from the free practice set that can be found at mba.com, where you should go make an account, by the way, if you plan to take the GMAT or the EA. Try this problem in 2 minutes. And that's roughly 2 minutes, which is about how long we get on average to do math questions on these exams. It's about a 2-minute per question average. So what do you got for me? A, B, C, D, or E? What are you going to go with?
You know, it's D.
Did you recognize the answer choices, by the way, from earlier? All of the sets of answer choices I showed you earlier, I pulled from official GMAT problems. So I didn't make them up, including this set. These are all from the real test. So, all right, John's going for D. Jeremy, you agree? Everybody else in the room? Are John and Jeremy right? We good? They are right. I'll give them. I'll give them that. Let's talk about how to get there. So again, you glance at wall of text, word problem, glance at the answer choices. Wow, there's a huge range in these answer choices. We're definitely going to be estimating on this one. And they also say approximate in the question. So certainly if they tell you to estimate, you're definitely going to estimate on this question. Wow, is this incredibly annoying? Are you kidding me? 18.5 miles per second. Are you kidding me? And no calculator. Okay, so I'm clearly not going to do that for the calculation because my everyone's like, oh, you must be so smart and be able to just do math in your head. I'm like, no, I'm super lazy. I will not do stuff. The reason I'm so good at standardized tests is because I'm so lazy that I'm always like, what's the easiest way for me to do this to get there? And that's what these tests are looking for you to do, is really to be able to think about it in that executive functioning is what they're testing. Can you really just look at the big picture and do what you need to do and then get out? So, okay, 18.5 miles per second. Wow, they want to know miles per hour. So there's some serious math that needs to be done to go from miles per second to miles per hour, but I really don't want to use 18.5. John, Jeremy, what did you use?
20.
20, right? 20. We're totally not using 18.5. Okay, so we're going to do 20. 20 miles per second. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is go to minute. If I can go 20 miles every second, then after 60 of those seconds or a minute, I'm going to go 20 times 60. Again, I can break this down 2 times 6 and then 10 times 10. So I've got 2 times 6 is 12 and then 0, 0, 100 miles per minute. And then I got to do it again because they want miles per hour. So times 60 again. Now I'm using my fingers, 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, 72. Okay. And then I've got my 3 zeros there, there, and there. So now I'm going 72,000 miles an hour. And I've also got my up arrows all the way through because I'm overestimating this entire time. I started with 20 and the estimate, I'm tracking it through because as we saw in the last problem, sometimes you estimate it this way, but then it makes the math of the problem go the other way, right? So you track it all the way through. So, all right, well, E and A and B are out clearly, but it's between C and D. We have to do a little bit more work to decide between C and D. So John and Jeremy, what did you do at this point? How did you decide between C and D?
I eyeballed it. I basically said, I said 1,200 times 60 is 72. And I was like, it's off by 1.5. That just seems too far to get to C. I'm like, I just on an eyeball. And then after, when I had some time left over, I was like, I went back and kind of calculated the percent just to check my work.
Okay. Like, John, did you do something similar?
Yeah, I did jot down a few things on my piece of paper here.
This one's not an in your head kind of problem. This is a jotted down kind of problem. Yeah. So as Jeremy said, right, so I overestimated by 1.5. So I can use my overestimation to go back and correct my estimation. And Jeremy, the only thing I'll point out to you is you were like, I eyeballed it, but then I went back and checked. Yeah, so you weren't totally confident that between C and D you'd actually gotten there, right? So let's do
I said 1.5 times. I was like, okay, so we got, I said 1.5 and I just kind of multiplied by 5 and I was thinking 7.5%. So 7.5% off of 72. I'm like, it sounds a lot like D.
It sounds
like,
good. Yeah. So that's good. So you felt comfortable with that and you use the level of estimation that you feel comfortable with basically, right?
Yeah, like I said, if it's 10%, then that would get me down really close to like I said, I was like, that 720 would get me down much closer to C. Anyway, I was just kind of dabbling. I'm lazy too.
I like it. I like it. I love it. So there's multiple ways you can estimate from here. You can do what Jeremy was talking about, which is like what percent over under 18.5 is more than 10% down, but less than 20%, or sorry, not more than 20, then it's a little bit less than 10% down, basically. 10% down would be 18 from 20. So the other thing you can do is literally just repeat your calculation with your overestimation. Your overestimation was 1.5. You had to multiply that by 60 and then by 60 again. to get the number that you were dealing with. Whenever you're multiplying anything by 1.5, the fastest way to do it is to take the number and then take half of that number and add them up. So you're going to take 60 and half of 60, which is 30. And you're just going to add them up anytime you want to multiply by 1.5. So that's 90. Do it again. 90 times 60. 9 times 6 is 54. Add the zeros. So I'm over by 5,400 miles per hour. And I started at 72,000. So I'm going to take something that ends in 000, and I'm going to subtract something that ends in 400. So what's my answer going to end in? $72,000 minus something, it doesn't even matter what, that ends in 400. It's going to end in 600. Look at the two answers that are left.
You're so smart.
I may be smart, but you know what I really am? I'm observant. I've done a lot of these problems and I've noticed that they will do, and this is not just me like, you know, gaming the test or something. The people writing the test are setting these opportunities up for us. They want us to find them. Well, they don't want everybody to find them because then too many people will do too well on the test, but they're setting up the opportunities for some people to find them. The question is whether you're training yourself to look for them. And again, this kind of training and this kind of, you know, just executive reasoning functioning that we're talking about being able to think logically about quant topics. This is the kind of thing that will really help you, not just in business school, but in your work life in general. Like you're doing this all the time. So that's it.
I'm amazed. Jeremy, I think Stacey is a total whiz.
Yeah, that's just best.
Absolutely. Master of the GMAT. There she is, Stacey Koprince with Manhattan Prep. And if you were amazed by the magic on the screen tonight, I think you'll be even more amazed by having a class with Stacey at Manhattan Prep. And of course, that class should lead to maybe a little help in getting admitted to a business school. And that's where Jeremy comes in. How about that for a segue?
Jeremy, when I forgot, I wanted to give everybody a discount code just in case you decide.
That's even better.
You decide that you want to do this. I'm putting it in the chat window right now, but it's for $75 off of any of our courses. So I'm sticking it in the chat window right now. Hold on.
There you have it.
So just copy that and save it in case you want to use it later. It'll be good till the end of this year, I think.
Okay, super. You have plenty of time, but don't delay. Just get it done. Right?
Assuming you decide to take a test, right?
Yeah, so you can actually sign up for a course and not actually say I'm going to take it on this specific on these days, right?
Yeah. So and well, I would go back to what I said earlier, which is get all the free stuff first. So actually earlier this year, drawing together a couple different threads here, John, what you said earlier about the equity issue and the diversity issues within this. So earlier this year, we made all of our foundations of math and foundations of verbal materials free. So there are two 500-page ebooks. There's a free live webinar, a 7-hour-long, day-long live webinar, and then just a bunch of practice problems and that sort of thing. It's all 100% free now. So I would go grab that and start studying. That's a month's worth of material right there. Go do it, then go take a practice test, which you can also get a free practice test, and then see where you're at.
So Jeremy, that should keep us busy for the rest of the year. All right. Hey, everybody. I want to thank Stacey and Jeremy for a terrific session. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed seeing the two of you, even on Zoom, if not in person. And for all of you out there, thanks for watching. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.